Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. When we signed the custody agreement, it looked fair, 50-50 on paper. A clean split, a line down the middle, legal custody and physical custody shared equally. That's how it read. That's what the court believed, that's what he told everyone, but reality doesn't fit into court documents. I moved an hour away, not out of spite, not to make life harder, but to give our daughter a shot at something better, a better school, a calmer neighborhood structure she craved. He agreed, verbally, with a shrug, like it was no big deal. Whatever's best for her, he said, but once it was done, the distance became leverage in his hands. And just like that, our 50-50 became 70-30. She lives with me during the school week. Every morning I pack her lunch, drive her to school, help with homework, manage meltdowns, talk to her teachers, monitor her meds. I schedule therapy, read about ADHD until midnight, prepare for the hard conversations with empathy and patience I didn't know I had. I do this because she's mine. Because she's a child, a good, anxious, misunderstood child, and I'm the one who stays. He has her some weekends, not all, and we alternate summer weeks, though some years it's more me than him. I track everything, who she's with, when, what I spend, how often she cries after returning from his house. There's no child support order. He insists that as long as she's with me, I'm financially responsible, as if I signed up for sole parenthood in disguise. He doesn't buy her clothes, barely contributes to activities, and only split the cost of school supplies this year because I refused to let it slide again. Gymnastics. He said she didn't behave well enough to deserve it. ADHD isn't a misbehavior. But try explaining that to a man who's never taken her to therapy, never read the diagnosis, and thinks structure is just another word for discipline. Still, I stretch, I provide, I show up. And when he throws tantrums, yelling, cursing, telling me his real family comes first, I grit my teeth and remind myself who I'm doing this for. For her. The little girl who calls my place home. Who has no room of her own in his house, no safe space, no privacy. The one who tells me she's been left alone with her baby siblings near water, and I have to smile and stay calm while every nerve in my body screams to file emergency paperwork. But it's not just fear, it's exhaustion. It's the weight of carrying two people's worth of parenting alone while being told I'm imagining the imbalance. He tells me I'm dramatic, too sensitive, overreacting. I believed that for years. Now I'm starting to wake up. Because something shifted in me the last time he raised his voice over the phone, telling me to handle it myself. It was the same week I found our daughter crying, hiding her medication because she thought maybe she was too broken to deserve it. I sat with her for hours, we talked. I reminded her she wasn't broken, she was just wired differently, and that's okay. And for the first time in months, she nodded instead of shrugging. That's when I started gathering the documentation. Dates, times, receipts, mileage, photos of her activities, screenshots of text threads, appointment logs, progress notes from therapy. I'm not trying to be vindictive. I'm trying to build a case for what's already true. This is not 50-50. This is not fair. This is not what she deserves. This is not sustainable. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for the court to see what I've lived for the past few years. When we first agreed to 50-50 custody, it felt, at the time, like the right thing to do. I wanted to believe he'd step up, that he would be the father our daughter deserved, present, supportive, consistent, but reality didn't take long to show its face. What we had on paper and what we lived in practice were two entirely different things. In truth, it was 70-30, sometimes 80-20. He saw her just enough to say he was involved, a weekend here, a holiday there, but the day-to-day, the hard parts, the real parenting that fell on me, not just by default but by necessity. It was me who moved her into the new school district, me who filed the paperwork, made the commute, juggled full-time classes and worked to keep her stable. I didn't do it for a pat on the back. I did it because I knew she deserved better. But when it came to the costs, emotional, financial, logistical, suddenly it was our daughter anymore. It was, she's with you so you figure it out. He told me he didn't feel financially responsible for anything that happened on my time. As if parenting is a hotel you check in and out of. As if the child we both brought into this world had two separate lives and mine just happened to cost more. Clothes on me, groceries on me, unexpected doctor visits on me, therapy appointments. Guess who did the research, made the calls, filled out the forms, and when I asked him to split the cost of gymnastics, one thing she loved that gave her confidence, he shut it down cold. She doesn't behave well enough for that, he said. But he wasn't the one watching her try her best through sensory overload. He didn't see the quiet moments after therapy when she finally smiled again. He didn't hear her ask me if she was a bad kid because she had trouble sitting still. All he saw were the outbursts, the hard days, the snapshots, never the full picture. And his reasoning: his wife had gone back to school, their income was lower now, his family at home came first. Those words stayed with me. As if our daughter wasn't his family, as if her needs, emotional, physical, financial, were negotiable, optional. And through all of this, I kept the schedule, I kept track. I documented who paid for what, where she slept, who drove her to appointments. Not because I wanted to build a case against him, but because part of me still hoped he'd come around, that he'd see what I saw, a little girl who needed both of her parents to show up. But he didn't, not really, and I started to wonder if maybe he never would. It's hard to explain what it's like to watch your child live in two completely different realities. At our house, she has a room of her own. A soft pink bedspread, her favorite posters taped to the wall, stacks of chapter books she reads under a flashlight long after bedtime. She has a calendar we update together, a corkboard for her drawings, a shelf full of sensory tools and fidget toys her therapist recommended. It's not fancy, but it's hers, it's home. At his house, she sleeps on the couch. No private space, no door to close when she needs a break. I once asked if she had a drawer for her clothes there, and she shrugged. I keep them in a bag, she said. She told me once that when she cries at her dad's, she hides in the bathroom. She doesn't want to bother anyone. She also told me that sometimes when he and his wife go out, she watches the younger kids, toddlers, still in diapers. That one time they were near the community pool and she had to make sure they didn't fall in. I remember going completely still when she said that.
She's 8. 8.
I sat her down that night and asked her if she ever felt unsafe there. She didn't answer right away, she just stared at her fingers. Then she quietly said, "I like being here better." She didn't have to explain why. It's not just about where she sleeps, it's about how she feels. At home, she laughs freely. She talks too fast and too loud and gets excited about the smallest things. She brings her worries to me, anxiety about school, friendships, her ADHD, even the way her brain works sometimes. At his place, she's quiet, she tiptoes, she doesn't share much when she comes back. Sometimes it takes her a full day to settle back in, to remember she doesn't have to walk on eggshells. I've brought this up to him gently multiple times. His response: "She's just acting out, she needs more discipline." Discipline. Like that's what she needs when she's overwhelmed and doesn't know how to process big emotions. He doesn't understand ADHD. I tried explaining her diagnosis. He rolled his eyes and said, "Back in my day, we just called that being a brat." I started writing it all down after that, every exchange, every refusal to help, every weekend she came home crying or tense or too quiet. I wanted a record, not for revenge but for validation, so I wouldn't gaslight myself into believing this was fine, normal, acceptable. Because it's not. I'm raising her on my own while pretending we're co-parenting. And somehow I still find myself wondering if I'm being too sensitive, too reactive, if I'm making it bigger than it is. But then I look at her and I know it is big. It's her life. It's her stability, her safety, her future. And I can't keep pretending anymore. They say co-parenting is all about compromise, but what do you do when you're the only one compromising? I've bent myself in every direction possible to keep the peace, bit my tongue more times than I can count, tried to find middle ground even when there was none. When I first asked for help with school clothes last fall, he flat out said, "That's on you, she's with you most of the time." I reminded him, "She's with me most of the time because you agreed to it, because it's better for her, because of the school." He shrugged, "Doesn't matter, that's your choice." It's always my choice when it costs something. Therapy, my choice. New shoes because her feet grew overnight, my choice. Gymnastics, definitely my choice, especially since he decided she doesn't deserve it. He said that straight to my face. She hasn't earned gymnastics, she needs to behave better first. She had just gotten her first gold star in therapy that week. She was glowing with pride. I didn't tell her what he said, I just signed her up and paid for it myself. I know she struggles, I know she isn't perfect. But how do you withhold joy and structure and confidence from a child just because they're still figuring themselves out? Her therapist says the progress she's made in 8 months is phenomenal. She's learning to express herself, to pause when she feels overwhelmed. She still has outbursts sometimes, but she recovers faster, apologizes on her own, even writes little notes saying, "I tried my best today." But he doesn't see that. He sees the 10 minutes she has trouble transitioning between houses and decides that's her whole personality. Meanwhile, I'm juggling school, work, therapy appointments, parent-teacher conferences, sensory meltdowns, and the constant emotional whiplash of raising a neurodivergent child. And still, he wants to argue about who buys the next box of cereal. Last week she came home with a note. "Dad says we can't ask him for money anymore." I had to close my eyes for a second before answering. I told her not to worry, that it wasn't her job to think about money. Then I sat in the bathroom for 20 minutes and cried into a towel. Because I am worried, I'm tired, I'm overworked, undersupported, and still somehow being painted as the one asking for too much. All I've asked for is help, not handouts, not full custody, just help. But I'm starting to realize I'll never get it from him. And maybe it's time I stop asking. It was the middle of May when I noticed it, a tiny flicker of something in her eyes, something too adult for an 8-year-old. She was quiet after her weekend with her dad, not the usual kind of quiet like she was tired from the drive or just in need of a snack. This was different, this was heavy. She sat at the kitchen table staring at her grilled cheese, picking at the crust. I asked how her weekend went. She shrugged. That's all I got, a shrug. Later that night when I was brushing her hair, she said softly, "I don't like when Daddy yells at you." I froze. She had heard again. I asked her what she meant. She said she could hear him on the phone sometimes, that he gets loud and says things like, "She's your responsibility," or "I'm not made of money." Once, she said, he slammed the phone down so hard she jumped. I told her that none of that was her fault, that grown-ups sometimes argue about grown-up things, but that she didn't need to carry any of it. But she already was. She told me that at her dad's house she doesn't like asking for things. "I just use what's there," she said, "even if I don't like it." When I asked why, she said she didn't want to make anyone mad.
She's 8.
An 8-year-old shouldn't be worried about making people mad. She shouldn't be in charge of keeping the peace between adults. She shouldn't be the one who notices who's paying for school supplies or who bought the shampoo this time.
But she does.
Because she's smart and intuitive, and most heartbreakingly because she has to be. She's been told directly or indirectly that things are her fault, that if she were better, she'd get more attention, more patience, more snacks, more freedom to just be a kid. I can see it weighing on her, in the way she always double-checks things with me. Is it okay if I finish my drawing before I shower? Can I have a second cookie, or will that be too much? She is always gauging, always measuring the temperature of the room, and every time I say, "Of course you can, baby," I feel both joy and grief. Joy that I can offer her a sense of safety, grief that she even has to ask. So I document it. Every incident, every dismissal, every time he forgets an appointment or refuses to pay his half of therapy, every time she tells me she's scared to speak up at his house, every time she comes home looking smaller than when she left. Because I have to build something out of this pain. A record, a timeline, a case. Not because I want to keep her from her father, but because I can't keep letting him chip away at her like this. I won't. One day, when this all makes it in front of a judge, I want to be able to say, this is what she carried, and this is why I couldn't let it continue. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that co-parenting only works when both people want it to work. When both people can put their child above their pride, their convenience, their own fragile egos. That's not what I have. What I have is a minefield. Every text is a risk, every phone call a gamble. I dread talking to him. It always starts out cordial, just enough fake politeness to keep things from blowing up in the first 5 seconds. But it always ends the same way: raised voices, accusations, emotional exhaustion. He swears, calls me names, claims I'm manipulative, dramatic, controlling. Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers that the little ears he's yelling around are the same ones he's supposed to protect. But then I know he knows, he just doesn't care. Or worse, he thinks it's justified. That I deserve it. There was one weekend, only a few months ago, where I called to ask if he'd remembered to bring our daughter's medication for her ADHD. I wasn't trying to start anything. I just knew how easily he forgot and I wanted to make sure she had it. He exploded. Said I was undermining him, accused me of micromanaging his parenting. Said if I thought I could do a better job, maybe I should just take her full time and stop crying about it. He hung up. I stared at the phone for a solid minute, completely stunned. My hands were shaking. The next day, I got a text from his wife. Please don't cause issues when she's with us, you're stressing everyone out. Like I had screamed, like I had thrown the tantrum. That's how it always goes, he lashes out and somehow I'm the problem, I'm the dramatic one, I'm the one who can't let things go. I used to believe them, that maybe I was the difficult one, that I needed to keep the peace, smooth things over, keep smiling through gritted teeth because the kids come first. But not anymore. Because keeping the peace should never mean silencing myself while someone else screams. So now I document. I save the texts. I record the dates, the conversations, the times he cursed at me in front of our daughter. I even keep notes of when she tells me things like how she doesn't have a space of her own at his house, how she sleeps on the couch, how she watches her siblings while adults are nowhere nearby. I'm building a story, the true one. Not because I want a war, but because I've been forced into a battlefield. He made it one. And I will not let my daughter be the collateral damage. Every child deserves a safe space. A place to call their own, even if it's just a small room with a bed, a lamp, and a few shelves for their drawings and toys. But when my daughter goes to her father's house, she has none of that. She doesn't even have a bed. It took months before she finally confessed it. We were driving home after a long weekend at her dad's. She was quiet, staring out the window, chewing her thumbnail like she always does when something's weighing on her. I asked her what was wrong. She said, I sleep on the couch there. I asked every time. She nodded, yeah, or on the floor in my little brother's room, but he cries a lot, so I usually just go to the couch. I bit the inside of my cheek until it hurt. It wasn't just the sleeping arrangements, it was everything around it. The fact that she has no drawer, no closet space, no toothbrush holder. Her things are tossed in a bag like an afterthought, packed, unpacked, repacked, every other weekend like she's just visiting, not living. But we're supposed to have 50-50 custody. He fought for it, said he wanted to be an equal parent. But where's the equality when she doesn't even have a pillow to call her own? I offered to buy her a small bed for their place, something simple, something foldable even, just so she wouldn't be sleeping in a communal area like a guest. He told me it wasn't necessary. She's fine, he said, stop being dramatic. I asked her how it made her feel, not having a room. She paused and said, I feel like I'm not really part of the family there. That sentence has played on repeat in my head ever since. She doesn't say it to hurt anyone, she says it because it's true. Her father remarried and started over, had more kids, built a new unit, and she is the leftover from a past he doesn't seem interested in integrating. And no matter how many times he claims he loves her, actions don't lie. You don't treat someone you love like a temporary guest. So now when she's with me, I make sure her space is hers. We painted her room together, she picked the color, a soft purple. We chose new bedsheets with stars and galaxies. I hung fairy lights above her window just the way she wanted. Every drawer is hers, every inch of that room tells her you belong here.
Because she does.
And I won't stop until the world sees it too, even if that means dragging the truth into a courtroom and making it undeniable. Not all harm leaves marks you can photograph. Some bruises settle deep in the chest, in the space between trust and fear. They don't turn purple or fade with time, they echo, they shape the way you breathe around someone, and that's what's been happening every time I speak to my ex. The shouting, the insults, the venom in his voice. He doesn't hit me, but God, the way he talks to me, sometimes I wish he would. At least then someone else might believe me when I say how cruel he can be. He curses me out over small things, calls me selfish, manipulative, stupid. He's done it in front of our daughter, and when I call him out on it, he just says, you know I don't mean it, you just piss me off. No apology, no accountability. He'll text me paragraphs of rage and then, an hour later, act like nothing happened. He expects me to keep functioning, to answer calmly, arrange drop-offs, keep the schedule intact, like he didn't just tear into me with his words. And for years I did exactly that. I kept the peace. Because I was scared. Because I didn't want to lose custody. Because I thought if I just smiled and kept things smooth, it would protect my daughter. But now I realize something: she sees it all. She hears the tension in my voice when I pick up the phone. She sees me cry quietly in the kitchen after another degrading conversation, and no matter how much I try to shield her from it, she knows. And it's changing her. She's more anxious, jumps when I raise my voice even slightly, apologizes for things that aren't her fault, asks if she made me mad when I'm just tired. She is learning to walk on eggshells the same way I did for years with him. And that stops now. I've started saving the messages, recording the calls, not because I want revenge but because I need proof, because emotional abuse is real even if there's no blood, because if I ever end up in front of a judge, I want them to see the damage that's being done to both of us. I've also started documenting every conversation with my daughter after she returns from his house. What she says, how she acts, her energy. I'm not building a case out of anger, I'm building one out of necessity. Because no child should grow up learning that love sounds like yelling or that communication feels like fear. And no mother should have to pretend she's okay when she's slowly breaking under the weight of someone else's rage. This chapter isn't about war, it's about survival. And we're surviving one recorded truth at a time. There's something heartbreaking about watching your child come back from a weekend quieter. Not sad, not angry, just smaller. Every time she returns from her father's house, I feel like I'm meeting a slightly different version of her. She's more cautious, more tired, like she's had to use up all her emotional energy just to be there. I try not to push her. I don't want to make her feel like she has to choose between us. God knows I've fought hard to keep her from being caught in the middle. But sometimes I gently ask, "How was your weekend, love?" And sometimes she talks. Like when she told me that she watched her baby brother in the bathtub while her dad took a nap.
She's 8.
8 years old and expected to be responsible for a toddler around water. When I asked her if she was scared, she just shrugged and said, "I made sure he didn't drown." Like it was normal. She doesn't have her own room there, sleeps on the couch most of the time, or shares a bed with her younger siblings. No space to call hers, no place to put her books, her drawings, her stuffed animals. Once she asked me if she could leave some things at Daddy's house, and I said sure. A week later she told me she didn't want to anymore. When I asked why, she said, "Because they'll just get used or lost." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip through that house and demand they make space for her, physical and emotional space, because she's not a guest, she's his daughter. But I didn't scream, I wrote it down, added it to my log. And I made a mental note: my daughter is learning that some rooms don't have doors for her, that some places, even ones she's told are home, don't feel like home. So I doubled down on making our home safe. She now has a corner in the living room that's all hers: pillows, books, art supplies. Her room is her sanctuary. When she's here, she blooms, she hums, she tells me jokes, she makes plans for her future. And when she's not here, I hold on to that, the version of her that exists when she feels loved, seen, and free. I don't know what the courts will say when the time comes. I don't know how many journals or screenshots it'll take to make them see that equal custody on paper doesn't mean equal quality of life. But I know what my daughter looks like when she's thriving. And I'll fight for that version of her until my last breath. There comes a point, after enough dismissed concerns, enough missed payments, enough weekends returned with a crumpled up kid in the backseat, where you stop asking for things to change and start demanding it. I've reached that point. This isn't bitterness talking, it's not revenge, it's not even frustration, though God knows I've had enough of that to fill 10 courtrooms. It's love. Love in its most protective, fiery, unwavering form. I've tried to be fair, I've tried to be patient, I've tried to make co-parenting work the way everyone says it should, amicably, respectfully, with the child's best interest at heart. But how do you co-parent with someone who prioritizes his household over his daughter? He told me once with complete sincerity that his family at home comes first, as if our daughter is just a guest in his life now, as if biology is canceled by remarriage. But I never stopped putting her first, not when the bills piled up, not when I worked through school, through stress, through exhaustion, not when I had every excuse in the world to step back. Because she's my kid, no matter what the custody papers say, no matter how many hours she technically spends with each of us. I am the one who stays up late making sure she finishes her book report because she's too anxious to concentrate. I'm the one emailing her therapist when she says her chest feels tight for no reason. I'm the one whispering in her ear before bed, telling her she's safe, she's smart, she's so loved. And I'm the one collecting every receipt, every email, every weekend schedule, every time I covered a bill, every time she said, "I don't like how daddy yells." Because it's time. It's time to modify the custody agreement, not out of anger but out of truth. It's time to establish a support order, not for my sake but hers. It's time to draw a line, not to cut him out but to hold him accountable. And if the courts want to see proof, I've got years of it. If they want to see the impact, they can come to my house on a Tuesday afternoon when my daughter is singing to the dog and dancing around the kitchen because she knows she's home. That's what I'm fighting for. Not just custody. Not just support. I'm fighting for continuity, for peace, for a girl who deserves a childhood full of color, not confusion. And I won't stop, not for anyone's convenience or discomfort, until that becomes her reality.